Hello everybody, welcome back. So it's been a couple of days since I'm coming back to this pair of shoes. I have done the Lexol conditioner that I talked about last time, and I actually did I think 3 or 4 different kind of like layers or coats or rub downs of this shoe. And then I thought I'd leave it for a couple days, let it really kind of soak in, and then come back and see if I felt a difference between the two. I would say the difference is pretty subtle now that it's completely dried, but I would say there is a little bit more pliancy, if that's even a word, to this pair of shoes. They just feel a little bit softer, like they can stretch a little bit more. This one's just a little bit stiffer. I don't want to say like crunchy, but just feels much tighter, whereas this one just feels like it just has a little bit more give than it did before, which is really the ultimate point here, because I don't want the shoes to be getting worn and dry and then cracking. So I am going to go ahead and do the same thing to this pair of shoes, probably give it a couple coats as I did with this one. I am going to put in some stuffing in the shoes so that they dry with kind of the shape that I want them to have. All right, let's get started. And I really am trying to get within all of the edges and all of the creases. And I'm not doing such vigorous rubbing here on the tips where I know I have these flaps. I'm doing maybe a little bit, but mostly I'm trying to go with the grain because I want to maintain those flaps, which I will later paint back down, and kind of the paint will tack them down and kind of maintain their structure there. So I'm just continuing to kind of rub on the leather, kind of maintaining those tissues around the hardware, because I really don't want to get the hardware moist or wet at all, because with time they'll actually start to stain the leather again like we saw before. And there's probably some stains that you can kind of make out right there that I had a really hard time actually getting out. I might, when I get to the kind of touch-up portion of this restoration, maybe I'll go back through. If I get a really good match of the color, I will go back and touch up those areas as well. But I definitely don't want to create any more stains, so I'm going to try to keep that hardware really dry throughout this process. Alright, so that's pretty much the first coat of conditioner. I'll let this dry and then probably do it one or more times. I don't know if this is something that I'll continue to do. I think probably once is going to be enough moving forward, but I just want them to be even and feel even for the person who ends up buying them. I don't want one to feel stiffer than the other, and I don't want them to wear any differently, so I'm going to try to be consistent with this particular pair. But I think moving forward, I think one round of conditioning is sufficient, and then it's kind of up to the owner of the shoes to maintain them and keep them in good condition. All right, so I'll let these guys dry, come back and do 2 more coats or so. All right, so I've gone through and conditioned this shoe as well, and both are now dry, and kind of have the same consistency of the leather. Next, we're gonna go on to spot coloring or painting all of the areas that have little imperfections. So I've actually already gone through and kind of matched the color kind of as best as I can do. So this is an acrylic paint, and so kind of as a last test to just make sure that it really does match, I am going to do a spot test on one side, and then I'll let it dry, come back in a few hours to just make sure that it dried on and it kind of looks in the same, looks like it's the same tone. And again, remember, these shoes have definitely been colored over the white paint, so that's going to be a little bit more tricky. So I like to just find a spot that does have an imperfection of some sort, and then I will just color that area. So here's a spot on the side, and you can already kind of tell it looks like it's a lighter color than what is on the background. But what I've noticed with these acrylic paints is that they actually dry a little bit darker. And so even though it kind of looks lighter right now, we might actually come back to this area and find that it's actually has dried on to really match the rest of the leather. So we'll come back to this guy in a couple of hours, and if everything looks good, we'll kind of go through and touch up the rest of the shoe. Hello friends. Okay, so we're back. It's been a couple of days, and we are now dry in the area that I had painted. So this was the area that we kind of touched up, and everything actually looks like it's dried pretty well. So I feel pretty good about that color matching, so I'm basically going to go through and touch up some more areas with that same paint that I already made, and then we'll come back and do it to the other shoe, and also show you some kind of tips and tricks as we go through, and then we'll look at the final product. Alright, so I've pretty much touched up this other shoe, and we're just going to let it dry, and we'll come back to see how the final paint dried looks on it. So moving on to the other shoe, which really hasn't been touched up with the paint just yet. I was going to show you how I touch up the tips of these shoes. So as I had mentioned before, the wear that these shoes tend to have is they'll kind of get scuffed up on the toes, and so these little flaps will develop, and so some of these have already kind of been tacked back down by the prior person who tried to touch these up. So I'll just show you the technique that I use that I think works really well. So these little flaps will form. I don't know if you can appreciate that. And if you just leave them like this, they'll just kind of continue to kind of curl up and just move on up further into the shoe, and you might like try to tear them, but they'll just kind of get like longer pieces will come off, and so it just kind of like really ruins the leather. And so what I like to do when I see these is I just like to get a little of that acrylic paint that I've already mixed up and the color matches, and I like to just kind of get in under that flap and just really kind of put a good amount under there. And then I basically like to just bring the flap down over that acrylic paint that I just tucked underneath it, and then just cover it up with some more of that same paint. And then I'll just go through and touch up like the rest of the areas here and get like a good layer on. And so this paint for those flaps kind of tends to work like in two ways. So basically it works like a glue, attacking down those flaps, and then actually touching up the leather that inevitably some of the original paint has just kind of come off. And so you can see this kind of flap that used to be here, this triangular flap, has already been kind of painted down and glued on from the prior owner, so I don't really have to do that. But I am going to color over it and just kind of add another layer of kind of glue protection and just hope that less of these flaps will develop for the future owner. And so then they'll just last longer. And so as I'm going through, you can see it's drying nice. So yeah, you know, these are never going to be back to pristine condition that they were in, but I think touching them up really does, really can help them get more life out of them. And so I think this is looking much better than it did before. So I'll just continue painting this one, and I'll show you what they look like after they've dried. All right, so this other shoe is pretty much touched up. I'm gonna let it dry. As I have been letting this shoe dry, I've noticed that it has a lot of wear here at the heel, like where probably there's the most contact between the foot and this shoe. There's been really a lot of wear of that paint, so I'm actually going to go through and touch this area up. And I actually already did that to this other shoe, so you can really see there's a huge difference. So this is kind of what the old wearing down looks like, and this is what it looks like after it's been touched up. So I think that turned out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to this shoe as well. All right, so I've gone through and touched these mules up with the paint that I matched to the leather color, and I think it's turned out pretty good. So I think we're pretty much all done with that part. And I've touched up the very edges of the heels where there was a lot of wear from the heel touching on the white leather part, so that I think looks actually a whole lot better. And so the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to touch up the edges with some black paint, and then we will be all done. All right, so basically what I'm going to use is this really fine tip brush. And I just have a little bit of acrylic paint here that I'm going to be using, and you can find this pretty much anywhere on Amazon or any of your craft stores. And so I'm just going to kind of go through like this and kind of just very carefully touch things up. If I do get any of the white leather, I'm just going to very quickly brush it off. And since this is water soluble paint, I can just use a wet cloth and just kind of wipe it off, although I probably will have to go back over the white paint and retouch that up. So you can do kind of a variety of things here. If you want to use some masking tape to protect the leather, I think I've done that in a prior video. I think it's the Jimmy Choo restoration one, so you guys can refer back and see kind of what I did. Or you can kind of just do what I'm doing right now, which is just very carefully touching up the edge there, because I'm just kind of a little too lazy, and I've spent a lot of time on this particular pair of shoes. And you know, if I wasn't making a video to kind of show you guys how I do this, this probably would have been too much time that I've spent on this pair of shoes. So it really is like a labor of love, and I can definitely see, you know, if you're doing this for your own pair of shoes, and it's really just about kind of getting as much life as you can out of your own pair of shoes, and kind of making sure that you didn't willy-nilly spend, oh gosh, is it $800? $800+ that these shoes are at. That's a crazy cost for a pair of shoes, unless you get like a whole lot of wear out of them. So I think, you know, for your own pair of shoes, I think that this is reasonable to do, but I think for reselling purposes, which is what I will be doing with this particular pair of shoes, it's a lot of work, and really it just kind of gets to a point of diminishing returns. And if you are reselling, you know, I just don't know that that's worth it to do here for the amount of return that you would get for this pair of shoes. But you know, I think it's different for everybody. You know, it depends on at what point you're at in your reselling journey. So it might be worth it for you, especially if you're just starting out. These higher end luxury items can cost a lot to get into, and so spending that extra time on making sure that they sell for as much as you can get out of them, I think is reasonable. And so yeah, I guess it just depends on where you're at in your reselling journey, if spending that time is valuable to you. So I think it's just very dependent on where you're at. But yeah, I just really wanted to show you guys that there's lots of things that you can do to get as much wear and really get these to look as good and as nice as they possibly can for a really long period of time. I think this can be a really good skill to have, especially if they're shoes that you're keeping for yourself, or if you're just in the reselling business and you want to make your items look as nice as possible, get top dollar for it. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Thanks for watching. I know this has been a really long two-part process of this video, and you know, you might decide that you're not going to do everything that I did to this pair of shoes at home yourself. I think you can kind of pick and choose to do just some of the steps that I showed you, and I think you can still kind of make them look really nice and get more life out of them. Yeah, so I guess what I'm just trying to say is thanks for watching along. I've been kind of rambling on and on in this video, but if you guys want to see the final product and what it looked like, and you can kind of check back and see how what they sold for maybe, or what the final product looks like in my Poshmark listings, I will put the link down below in the video description. Feel free to check it out. And yeah, maybe comment below, maybe subscribe. I don't know. I'm kind of new to this whole YouTube thing. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought, and if you are going to try anything of what I showed you on some of your own items, whether they're for reselling purposes or they're for your own pair of shoes and you're just trying to get more life out of them or get them to last a little bit longer, yeah, just let me know. And yeah, subscribe, click that bell notification for when I do randomly post more videos, and you'll be notified, or like the video or leave a comment, whatever. All right guys, thanks so much for stopping by. Have a good one.